gold and silver will overcome the cartel, and it'll probably mean the end of the cartel. It's just a matter of when.
Now, if we look at J.P. Morgan's position in silver, it looks like they're expanding their short position again. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, and see how well they've done. Yeah, let me point out one thing about these COTs reports, okay? I've been watching the COT report every frickin' week since 2002, and I can tell you that between 2002 and 2007, it was a dead indicator. I mean, there was no doubt that every single time that the short position, the commercial position was building, that gold and silver would be smashed. And every single time it contracted, which would be after a smash, it would go right back up. And I'm trying to tell people now there is zero correlation right now, and I mean zero, between the COTs and the gold and silver prices. Of course, they still short them on the way up, and of course, they when the prices are going down, they buy them. But there's no real correlation anymore. Just look, I mean, the short position has been going up by the commercials for 2 months now, and what has silver done? It's gone from 26 to 35. So what are we supposed to say? Well, yeah, it means it's going to fall. Yeah, eventually it will fall. But the point is that, J.P. Morgan, the COMEX, there is no business there going on. It's simply a matter of naked shorting as much as they can, and eventually they'll lose. So I'm not worried about the COMEX at all. Just like people, at one point they worried about the dollar index. The dollar index has been in the same trading range now for 7 years, and still you'll see commentators, actually 8 years, and the commentators will still say, well, gold's up or down because of the dollar. The COMEX, the dollar, mean nothing as far as those statistics. The cartel attacks every day. It doesn't matter if they're shorting or if they're covering. They're always going to be there at 3 o'clock, 8:20, 10 o'clock, and 12. And net, they're losing. They will keep trying, but they're getting diminishing returns of what they're doing, and they're going to keep losing.
Well, Andy, you're absolutely on fire, and the reason we love speaking with you so much is because you're so knowledgeable and you cut right to the brass tacks. I mean, you don't beat around the bush. Let me ask you about something that's a little on the fringe, Andy. I've talked about it with others. Zero Hedge covered it briefly last week. We saw $6 trillion in bonds seized in Zurich by Italian police. Now, what was noteworthy to me about that, and Zero Hedge commented, and rightfully so, the fact that these $6 trillion in quote-unquote fake bonds were in these very uniquely patinaed, apparently authentic Federal Reserve chests. Have you been following that story at all? And if you have, can you give us your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I follow every story, and I have a love-hate relationship with Zero Hedge because I feel that they are the best financial website in the world. The only problem is they don't seem to want to go to the most important issue of gold manipulation. But either way, yeah, I've been following that story. It's one of many true conspiracy stories, in that there's really no way of knowing exactly what's true and what's not. Yes, I was told it says that they were Chicago Federal Reserve containers where they were. That's probably the part I believe the most, because anything that has to do with the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve is untrustworthy. And if they did actually put another $6 trillion into circulation, what's the difference? They put $16 trillion into circulation in those secret loans we just found about. How many other trillions are out there that we don't know about? I don't think we'll ever know exactly what happened there, but, that's the problem with paper money. You can make all of it that you want, and gold you can't. So at some point, all these shenanigans will end, and all the conspiracy theories will end, and we'll look up, and gold will be $10,000 an ounce, and the dollar will be crashed, and it won't matter how many treasury bonds they print.
Okay, I want you to comment on this, too. The other night I was watching an episode of this new smash show I think it's on Nat Geo, called Doomsday Preppers. And one of the preppers in this particular show I was watching was worried about a worldwide financial collapse, or more specifically, a financial economic collapse here in this country. And at the end of that particular segment with that particular prepper, the graphic came up supplied by Nat Geo and a voiceover that says, the reality of a financial collapse in the United States, experts say, is highly unlikely. And then the graphic said that there's only $2 trillion, including all checking accounts, of money in circulation. You want to comment on that? That felt like an awful lot of misinformation to me at the end of that segment.
Right. Well, I mean, who knows how much money's in circulation? And plus, the government can define it however they want. They can, they have M1, M2, the no longer M3, and then what I call M4, which is all the stuff they don't tell you about. And then they got all kind of semantic definitions. What is circulation, meaning is it actually a dollar bill versus digital? And again, anyone who's trying to give you numbers of what kind of money is out there probably has wrong information. I go to John Williams at Shadow Stats for the projected M3. Which is probably about as close as anyone has out there. But then again, when you read that there's $16 trillion of secret loans out there, it's like, what's the point? All these years the World Gold Council's been putting out their stupid central bank gold holdings, and they make their supply and demand projections based on it. And then all of a sudden the Chinese will say, oh yeah, we own 1,100 tons instead of 600 tons. So the point is, all the numbers that are out there are fake. The fact is that there's enough overt printing of money by everyone to know that the ratio of gold to paper is out of whack. But who knows what the real number is? It's probably exponentially more than we know about.
Before we wrap up, just a couple more points. When you mentioned John Williams, when I got into this doing videos, even just a couple years ago when I did the silver perspective, John Williams was talking about the inflation-adjusted all-time high in silver if you use the M3, M4 numbers of being about $456 an ounce. He's now redone that calculation. He says it's closer to $517 an ounce for silver. And, as you and I both know, James Turk has been saying for almost a decade that we will see by the year 2014 to 2015 $400 silver and $8,000 gold. And what's funny, Andy, is that we're already sitting here in 2012. It seems like in my mind's eye when I talk about these things, 2013, 2014, that's still 5 years away. It's right around the corner.
Yeah, well, it's like stock multiples. You're looking 12 months ahead, and then as soon as you get into January of 2012, you're already looking at 2013 earnings, and it's becomes a lot closer. But as to the price of gold and silver, my target, look, I just put out a piece 2 days ago or 3 days ago called The Ultimate Quadruple Top Breakout. So far it's the most popular piece that I've written because it takes the chart of silver, the inflation-adjusted chart that goes back to the 1400s. The high price back then was about $800 an ounce. And it shows how the we were at $50 an ounce up until 1900 or so when all the major discoveries of silver were made out west in Nevada and Idaho and the like. All that supply is gone now. Okay, and then on top of that, we have silver returning to its monetary role while at the same time being the second most used commodity on Earth. So I think you go back to that $50 price from 1900 and the $50 price from 1980 and the $50 price from last year, and you're talking about the potential for the biggest 100-year plus quadruple top breakout in history. And I think it'll easily take it, just on technicals, something like that to the $800 price we had, 500 years ago when gold and silver were the only true money in the world. But that's just one way of looking at it. I just look at, I'm not the only person. Sinclair, Mike Maloney, and others have looked at just the overt money printing that we've seen, and again, just the overt part. And if you do the balance of the balance sheet to the gold, like Jim Sinclair would say, you get $15,000 to $20,000 per ounce of gold. My silver price target is based on the ratio. It was 15-to-1 gold silver ratio for the past for 500 years or so. Since we went off the gold standard, it's been so manipulated that the average has been 50 or 60. And now that now that 15-to-1 ratio was based on the amount of gold and silver produced. It used to be 15 ounces of silver for 1 of gold. Now that ratio is closer to 8 to 9 ounces because it's becoming more scarce. Plus, all the silver is gone while all the gold is still there. So I think 15-to-1 ratio is a no-brainer for the future. And it could overshoot as low as 5-to-1 if you have a real shortage of silver. And therefore, with my gold price production, I get $1,000 to $4,000 price target for silver. Sometime, like you said, potentially not as far in the future as people would think.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, that's why we love speaking with you, Andy. Talk about thinking outside the box. $1,000 to $4,000 an ounce price projection for silver is it sounds astounding, but if you've done the research, if you spent the time actually working the numbers, taking a look at the supply and demand issues and the paper suppression that we talk about endlessly, which is just so critical to understanding the big picture, it's realistic. And I know people think that's pie in the sky. It sounds crazy, but I'll tell you what's crazy is this government and governments around the world printing in perpetuity money out of thin air. Okay, last question. This one is a little bit out there, and a simple Google search ought to give us the answer. But this one comes from Tony, and he's worried about a meltdown in this country. What if he wanted to leave the country? Are there any laws in place that would limit the amount or the ability of a person to take physical metals on an airplane to get out of the country?
Well, I mean, of course, you have to declare, I think, $10,000 of currency on you, and there are differences in the declaration value because, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think if you have a $50 gold coin, then it can be called $50. But again, even if you're going to do that, taking a lot of golds out of the country on an airplane could be a bit dangerous. I do know one person who has told me he did that, and at some point a few years later, the feds were at his house asking him questions. So, it's if you're going to move out of the country, you have to really, really do your due diligence. I can't say I have the answers. I haven't thought of leaving the country, but there's, I can say that the controls against taking money out of the country are limited now compared to what they're obviously going to be in the future when things get really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the Patriot Act and everything else in place, due diligence is the key, because the last thing you want to do is show up in good faith at the airport, even if you just, let's say you're going to try to leave the country with $50,000 in gold. The last thing you want them to do is seize it and lock it up in a court case, because you'll probably never get it back.
That's right.
Well, Andy, thanks so much. Why don't you tell folks again how they can find your excellent work on the Internet? Let's get people linked over there right away.
Right. You go to milesfranklin.com. In the front page in the top right, there's a box. You get in. I write 5 days a week for free, as does David Scheckman, the founder of our firm, where, this is what we pride ourselves on at Miles Franklin in education. And you can call me anytime or email at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
Let's push a little further on that, Andy. Do you have a phone number people can call? Because I know that unlike some of the other online dealers, people don't put their orders through in electronic form at Miles Franklin.
Sure. Well, if you want to talk to one of the brokers at Miles Franklin, you'd call 800-822-8080. But if you want to call me personally with questions, it's 720-350-4130.
Yeah, you can't get that kind of access from AppMex or Gainesville or anybody else, guys. Andy Hoffman of Miles Franklin, thanks so much for your time. I mean, when I say I appreciate it, I'm understating it. We really all truly appreciate your expertise and the fact that you're in our camp on this thing. Because like I always say, we're all in this mess together.
Yeah, absolutely, and the service that you're doing is equally important, Sean. Thank you.
Geez, I'm blessed to even be a part of it. All right, Andy, until we speak again, thanks and take care.
Okay, you too.
Thanks for tuning in, and check out sgtreport.com for all the latest. Good night.